What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And as we all know, training camp 13 days away. No, 12, 11 days away. Oh my God, it's getting closer and closer every single day. It's right around the corner, under 2 weeks away, and I'm super excited for training camp. Of course, we're going to see some awesome position battles from the Giants. Who will be running back two behind Devin Singletary? Who will be the slot cornerback? Who will be the outside cornerback opposite Deonte Banks? There are so many different storylines to keep an eye on at Giants training camp this summer, and of course, we're going to be breaking all of that down for you, but as well as previewing any acquisitions that the Giants could be making during the start of training camp or even all the way up to the regular season. We know that once the team gets on the practice field, that's Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen's time to take a look at their players and say, hey, this is where we need to improve, this is where we're really strong, this is where we're weak. That's when they can really evaluate the roster and then decide if they want to make any more big moves. Now, we know the Giants got an extra $11 or so million in cap space from the retirement of Darren Waller, so they have some money to make some moves if they so choose to. If Joe Schoen gets on the practice field in 2 weeks from now and takes a look at that cornerback spot that we know is wide open and says, hey, we don't have a true starter there, we got to make a move, he can go out onto the trade block, he can go out into free agency. There are some names available, and that's what we kind of want to dive into in today's episode. Could the Giants still make a splash at CB2? Now, if you've been keeping up with Hard Knocks or really just watching what the Giants have done all offseason, it's been alluded to the fact that they know they have a weakness at CB2, but just haven't gotten around to fixing it quite yet. So maybe they still could. Maybe by the end of training camp, there is a new player on this roster. Maybe that player joins through the waiver wire at the end of the preseason. Maybe he joins via trade. We got a couple trade candidates that we want to talk about. Or maybe the Giants go ahead and sign a pretty old veteran cornerback to just kind of come in here and stabilize things with some established experience in the NFL. There's many different options out there, and again, we want to dive into a few of the ones that we found and kind of discuss maybe some CB2 acquisitions that the Giants could potentially make between now and the start of the regular season. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And who are some of the cornerbacks that you're looking at that could potentially be joined to the New York Giants this summer?
My goodness, I was like being in the electric chair. Absolute rapid fire. But I'm doing pretty good. And listen, this Giants secondary, we've talked about it a lot this offseason. I think you guys are probably well accustomed to the conversation of, this team just lacks experience, right? The secondary, they, let Adoree Jackson go, still on the open market. But this group just lacks that game experience, that sample of action that says, well, we trust this guy. I think we can all kind of come to the end conclusion that we like Deonte Banks, good player, has the upside to be great. We want to see him be the CB1. I think that's fair. I think that's pretty much where we're in lockstep with that one. But beyond him, it becomes a question. Do we trust Cordell Flott? Do we trust Nick McLeod? Do we trust Andrew Phillips? Do we trust Darnay Holmes? Do we have faith that these guys can step up and go against some of the better receivers in football? If you play the Detroit Lions, are you going to be able to hold down Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams and Khalif Raymond and some of these really good players? Are you going to be able to manage that? Or the Eagles with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and, some really good talent there? The Jets with Garrett Wilson, you got some good players. They may even go get Devonta Adams at this point. Who knows? This Giants secondary is going to have their hands full with some good teams. And if they get injured, it's going to go downhill pretty quickly for them. So I think that there will be an acquisition at some point of somebody that's better than a Trey Herndon in terms of just experience and what they've done with it. So, the free agent's still available. I'll just list them off for you. I think, so these are available free agents this year. Xavier Howard, I know he's going through something, so I don't want to go in that direction. J.C. Jackson, Adoree Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Peterson, who just kind of put himself in a pretty bad light with Daniel Jones, so I don't think he'll be coming here anytime soon. Steven Nelson, Keon Crossan, Eli Apple, no thank you. Justin Bethel, Darryl Worley, who else is on here that could even make the roster? Nobody really stands out to me.
Well, let me kind of stop you there because somebody that you mentioned did stand out to me. What do you think of a potential Adoree Jackson reunion? Now, we know that at the end of the regular season, before free agency began, he kind of alluded to the fact that he would like to be back with the Giants, but he's also been very open about also kind of wanting to move on at the same time. He's open to all of his options. The Giants seemingly never gave him a phone call, never showed interest in re-signing him. They actually went ahead and gave his number away pretty early on. As soon as they drafted Andrew Phillips, we're like, here, take number 22. It's not Adoree Jackson's anymore. So it's almost like the writing is on the wall that the Giants don't want him back. He doesn't want to be back. But you can't shut the door on that just yet. Do you think that that could be an option? And I guess more importantly, is that something that you would consider yourself or be interested in a potential reunion with Adoree Jackson?
That's a good question. I don't. I mean, Dory Jackson's a fine, experienced player. Maybe if he signed a 1 year deal, I could be down, but I think he's looking for more of a 2 to 3 year deal, probably a 3 year deal with like a out after the second season. He's still pretty young. The Giants need a 1 year deal type of guy that can just come in and fill a role, unless you're getting some of them more established. And we'll discuss a Marshawn Lattimore acquisition, what that might look like, but if Adoree Jackson would take a 1 year deal, yeah, like why not bring him back? I know, he has experience. He's been with this team for a while. He gets the New York media market, but you just can't put him in the slot, right? He's got to be on the outside. And he got cooked last year, to be quite honest with you. Kind of every game. Like he was pretty bad last season. So, I know the Giants are going in a little bit different of a direction. They're not going to be like on an island anymore. They're going to be playing a little bit more zone coverage, relying on that front four to produce the majority of the pass rush. So maybe Adoree is a little bit better suited for this zone coverage role than he would be like just manning up. And he's fast, decent athlete, but I think he's past that portion of his career where he'd be like an elite man coverage corner. I think he's more so fine in zone at this point. Maybe he's a good fit for what we're trying to do on defense now. But again, I think he's looking for a 2 3 year deal with an out maybe after that second season. I don't think he wants a 1 year deal. I think he's waiting for the inevitable training camp injury to capitalize on that, just like a lot of these guys are. I mean, Stephon Gilmore's still out there. He made, 10 mil last year. Probably gets that less this year. He's played, 2 consecutive years with over 1,000 snaps. I know they put him in a pretty tough spot in Dallas last year when Trayvon Diggs went down with the ACL tear and Gilmore had to be elevated. But like he's coming off a season where he was the CB1. Now he doesn't have to be. He could be the CB2 behind Deonte Banks. Not a bad move. I know he was drafted, I think, when Joe Shane was in Buffalo. So maybe I might be bugging. Maybe it was somewhere. It was somewhere else, but it doesn't really matter. Either way, he has tons of experience and could fit that nice CB2 role for the Giants. So what are your thoughts on Gilmore? A lot of people have brought up his name. He's definitely past his prime, and he's played a couple of seasons with a lot of reps. So maybe that does offer you some value at this point in his career.
Well, I'll just quickly put in my thoughts on Adoree Jackson. First of all, I think that bringing him back is a pretty good idea because we know that he's a culture and locker room fit. So if the Giants get through training camp, and again, this isn't one that I would rush to make. This isn't a signing I'd be like, okay, this needs to happen tomorrow. This is more so, let's see how training camp goes. If Cordell Flott is like really struggling and the Giants aren't confident in their CB2 position anymore, then I'd just be like, all right, let's call back Adoree Jackson. Let's run it back with him, sign him on a 1 year deal. I know you mentioned that you think he might be looking for something a little bit more long term, but still short term. I don't think so. It's already July and he doesn't have a contract. He's probably just getting a 1 year deal pretty close to the veteran minimum. I wouldn't say he gets the minimum. Maybe a 1 year, $5 million deal for Adoree Jackson. Sign me up for that. Again, you're probably not upgrading your secondary, but at least you're getting a little bit more consistency, a little bit more reliability. You know what you have in Adoree Jackson. Whereas with Cordell Flott and some of these other guys, we just don't know what we have, and that can be a little bit scary. It's very boom or bust. But at least with Jackson, you're probably getting an average to maybe below at this stage in his career cornerback. However, maybe he bounces back in a new scheme, new system. He really struggled last year, but really all of the Giants cornerbacks did playing in Wink Martindale's defense. Now it's Shane Bowen. Maybe that is more suited to his skill set. Maybe Adoree Jackson could play at a high level here. But also, he's 28 years old. Don't sleep on Trey Herndon, who the Giants signed earlier this offseason. Also 28 years old. Has played in playoff games before. I think he has 2 career starts in the postseason. Has a bunch of starts throughout his career. And David Long Jr., a cornerback that the Giants signed, was actually a Super Bowl champion for the Los Angeles Rams. Started in that Super Bowl. Was a pretty key piece of that defense. Don't sleep on him either, potentially taking over as CB2 if some of these youngsters struggle. I think both of those guys, Giants fans need to keep a closer eye on this summer. Both Trey Herndon and David Long Jr., 26 and 28 respectively. They're bringing a lot of that experience to the table. They've started in big career games in the past, and David Long Jr. in particular had a very solid run in that postseason where the Rams went on to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. So I wouldn't sleep on those guys potentially becoming CB2 if injuries arise or if struggles arise at that position with some of the younger guys contending for the job. But on Stephon Gilmore, Alex, that would be, in my opinion, a bit of a splash signing for the Giants at this stage. I think he gets a little bit more money than what Adoree Jackson could possibly command. He's still a very good cornerback. I don't think he will ever be a bad cornerback. By the time he retires, he's still going to be playing at a high level just because he's so technically sound and has such high football IQ. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is almost 34 years old, still playing at a high level, and I don't think he's ever had a bad season in his career. He's just always been one of the best cornerbacks in the league. He's big body, he's strong, he's smart. he's Stephon Gilmore. Like, what more could be said? So if the Giants were to bring him in, here's my thoughts and feelings on it. I would love it. I think it would be a big upgrade to the secondary, and I think that he would actually potentially even be CB1 just based on seniority and experience over Deontay Banks. You might trust him a little bit more going against some of these top wide receivers because he's faced them before and been in the league for so long. And that's not a knock on Deontay Banks. You can have two CB1s in the NFL, right? Like, you can have two really good cornerbacks. That just makes your team even better. So the only reason that I would think the Giants wouldn't sign Stephon Gilmore is, again, the idea of trying to develop this youth. If you sign Gilmore before training camp, like if he were to join this team tomorrow, then in 2 weeks from now when they're at training camp, a lot of those reps that would have been given with the first team to Cordell Flott are now being given to Stephon Gilmore. So you want to develop this young talent, you want to put these guys in position to succeed, but if you sign a guy like Stephon Gilmore, you immediately take some of those practice reps away from a guy like Flott and stunt his growth. And I think that is a little bit problematic. So if the Giants are going to go after a guy like that, make a splash on a Stephon Gilmore or some other high-end talent, for me, it happens in preseason. Once you get over to the second half of this kind of training period in the offseason, once you get close to the regular season, if Gilmore's still available then, that's when I go ahead and I target him, because I think these young guys really need these reps, really need this practice and development. Give them the entire summer to really prove what they've got, and if they don't prove that they've got the goods, then go ahead and find the goods on the free agency market. So I would welcome a Stephon Gilmore signing. I think it's an upgrade. I think having him and Deontay Banks gives you a really solid CB duo to kind of lock down two receivers on an opposing roster. But again, I don't want to take away so many opportunities from these young guys that the Giants desperately need to pan out. They need to develop these guys. So I would only target Gilmore if he's still on the market come, I guess, August. If he's still available on the free agency market, that's when I would target a guy like Stephon Gilmore. And I feel the same about any other splash signings or trades that they could make, Alex. And I know yesterday we didn't go too deep into it, but we were talking about Najee Harris in the running back room in yesterday's episode. If you guys didn't see that, go check it out. But we talked about Najee Harris because there was a mock trade posted, I think, on Bleacher Report that had the Giants landing Najee Harris in a trade. It was a couple of mid-round draft picks. We weren't crazy about it. But in the same article, there was a very similar value of packaged picks being traded, I think, from the Vikings to the Saints for Marshawn Lattimore. And that was a lot more interesting to us because we thought CB2, much bigger position of need. Marshawn Lattimore has a contract that seems like the Saints want to move off of it. He's a really talented player, would absolutely be an upgrade for the Giants at CB2. So I do want to get more of your thoughts on that kind of mock trade in particular, Alex. If the Giants were to send, I think it was a fourth next year and a third the following year for Marshawn Lattimore, what would your thoughts be on that? Do you think that he could be a player that the Giants kind of target here as they get deeper into this free agency period? Maybe they don't feel confident in their CB2 spot. Would you be open to a trade for Lattimore, or would you rather hold on to that draft capital?
Well, if you go and get Lattimore, like if you just look at his contract, gives a little bit more insight and context into what that would look like. So Lattimore has 2 more years, actually 3 more years left on his deal after the 2024 season, which he has a $14.6 million cap hit this year. The Giants would have an out theoretically at $20.6 million in dead money. So, you're really bringing him on with the intention of keeping him. With that being said, you could restructure his contract. You could push that dead money and you could create void years. The void years already built into his deal. I think that the Saints would have to still maintain. But I think you could, theoretically make it work if you push those cap hits into the future a bit. However, you might not have to do that if if the Giants end up moving on from Daniel Jones in the future. Obviously you're bringing in a guy like Lattimore with the hope that it's kind of like a backward scenario, because like you want your quarterback situation to be solved, and if it is, you can't really afford Lattimore, but if it isn't, then you can afford Lattimore. So it's kind of either way hurts you because you're losing one of those situations, or I guess you go out and get a rookie quarterback and you feel like you've taken a step forward if that's what the Giants end up doing. But Lattimore's contract at $4.6 million cap hit this year is not that bad. They can make it work. But with that being said, $31.4 million in 2025, $28.5 million in 2026. Maybe you sign him, maybe you acquire him and extend him immediately and push those cap hits into the future. You could try to do something like that. But with that type of draft capital, if you're giving up draft capital for a guy that you're not sure you can even keep beyond this upcoming season, knowing that this upcoming season is really about rebuilding and giving reps to rookies like Malik Neighbors and Tyler Nubin, more experienced, Deontay Banks, getting your offensive line situated, like, does it really make sense just yet? Because at the end of the day, Anthony, I think the Saints have to cut him next year anyway. You know what I mean? Like the Saints are always operating at negative like $60 million in cap space. They're constantly cutting players, constantly restructuring contracts, constantly trading guys away. I think they end up having to cut Marshawn Lattimore next year and eating the dead money anyway. And if they end up doing that, the Giants could just sign him in free agency, for a much lesser cap hit in a year where maybe they actually want to reinvest in the secondary with a veteran like that. So I don't think it's the right move right now based on where this team is at. If we were like a Marshawn Lattimore away from making in the postseason, making a deep run, hell yeah, I'm all in. You exercise those windows. The Giants are not in one of those windows right now. They're in an entirely different position where they're trying to maximize some of their youth and get experience under their belt and figure out what the hell Daniel Jones can do. Like, that's really, I mean, for the sixth year, we're asking the same question. What the hell can Daniel Jones do? So, this is kind of where we are right now in terms of roster building. Marshawn Lattimore, does he make sense for us right now? Not really. Doesn't really make sense for us right now, but with the Saints always having to release players, they have an out in his contract next year. They probably have to take it. I don't think they can handle the $31 million cap hit. The Giants may be able to sign him in free agency anyway. If Daniel Jones walks, they can probably sign Lattimore to a more affordable deal, push the cap hits deeper into his contract, or take on the dead money early on. And live to see another day and have a rookie quarterback if that's what ends up happening. So that's kind of what I would say now. Not worth using the draft capital when you might be able to just get him in free agency next year. There'll be competitors, obviously. But if the Giants are in a good spot and they can offer the money and they have the money, that's where you have a little bit more flexibility. And, next year, I don't know what the class necessarily looks like. I can let me see if I can go forward 1 year and see who's available. Carlton Davis, Shavarius Ward, DJ Reed, Jonathan Jones, Byron Murphy, Jeff Okuda, Rasul Douglas, Mike Hilton, Dante Jackson, CJ Henderson, Shaquille Griffin, Tre'Davious White, AJ Terrell, really solid player. There's a lot of guys. I mean, look, some of these guys are probably getting signed to long-term deals. But with that being said, one or two or three of them may maybe hit the open market and the Giants have an opportunity to go and sign somebody. I think you wait. Next year's class looks really, really strong, barring, obviously, franchise tags, and which usually aren't used on cornerbacks and extensions. So I think the Giants have the luxury of kind of waiting and not being aggressive right now to go get like a Marshawn Lattimore. I think you bring in a guy on a 1-year deal. That's my opinion.
All right, so then let me throw this option out there instead. Rather than making a splash for a Lattimore or somebody who's really high end that you have to hand money to, how about taking a chance on a young player whose talent didn't get realized at the team who drafted him, maybe needs a change of scenery? And I'll throw two names out there for you. Bills cornerback Kyer Elam. Of course, we know Joe Shane was there when they drafted Kyer Elam. He had a lot of talent coming out of, I believe it was Florida. Hasn't really played up to the expectations, was a starter for them as a rookie, I think for half of his rookie season. Pretty much phased out of the lineup. I think became a healthy scratch at one point this past season. Probably on the trade block in a make-or-break year going into his third season. Kyer Elam could be one option. Also, shout out Kyer Elam, Palm Beach Gardens native. Salute you. Benjamin School product. My boy, played football with my friend John Thompson. Shout out to you. A lot of cool stuff there. I'll always be rooting for Kyer Elam because of that. But another player as well, Alex, Packers cornerback Eric Stokes. Similar situation. Was a starter as a rookie. Played 16 games, started 14. Following year, played in 9, started 9. Following year, 3 games played, 2 games started. I don't know. I think injuries were also a problem for him. But those are pretty much a couple of guys, and I'm sure that there are others out there, with 2 guys who are young, play on the outside, on the boundary at cornerback, have some talent that doesn't seem to be tapped into fully, whether it be because of injuries or just too many good players ahead of them or whatever the case might be. Would you like to see the Giants make a move like that? And keep in mind, this is pretty similar to the move that the Giants made last offseason for Boogie Basham. That's a young player, former second-round pick for the Buffalo Bills. There was a familiarity there. He was a talented player coming out of college, didn't get all the playing time, and didn't realize his potential in Buffalo. Giants pick him up to become a rotational depth piece for them. Maybe they do something similar, low-risk, high-upside move for a guy like Eric Stokes or Kyer Elam. Is that a route that you would like to see the Giants go if they don't feel comfortable with their cornerback spot by the end of training camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Stokes will be more difficult to pry away because the Packers feel like they can compete right now, and I think they want to have that depth, if not, upside to become something. It definitely to me feels like they'd be lesser of a trade partner, but I do like the Elam type of opportunity because maybe the Giants can figure out something. Well, Elam probably has some value, right? He's only going into his 3rd season. He's 23 years old, right? He's a young dude. And he has a lot of upside in terms of his tangible qualities. I just think he probably had some inconsistencies. Not probably, definitely had some inconsistencies. And maybe the Giants find a way, if they end up wanting to trade Darius Slayton, they could do a little swap there. Maybe there's something to consider. with that type of move, because Kyra Elam, as a first-round pick, has a fifth-year option as well, so he has 3 more years of control as a former 23rd overall selection in 2022. In his first year, 570 snaps, gave up 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and had an interception or had a pass breakup. He gave up 381 yards and almost a 72% reception rate. Last year, he only played 210 snaps, but he had a really good performance against Pittsburgh in the wild card last year. 53 snaps, and he only gave up 12 yards in coverage. 3 targets went his way, gave up 1 reception, and he had an interception in that game. He was really solid. So like he kind of bounced back after being benched like the majority of the season, and put up some decent numbers in regard to, you know, just what he was given to work with. So, you know, you kind of like that. I do like to see more opportunities from him. The Giants have such a weak secondary in a lot of ways that Elam would kind of enter in on day one and have an opportunity to win the starting CB2 job. I like competition. And look, you know, you talked about Stephon Gilmore, who would just kind of be taking reps away from Cordell Flott. Elam's a little bit different because if he wins the job, you still feel good about it because he's still on a rookie contract and he's still young and he can still develop into a solid player. It really just depends on how the Bills feel about him. Do they think he can be that guy this year? Do they feel like he can develop into one of their marquee corners? That's what we'll have to find out. But if they don't, if they're a little bit on the fence about him and they feel they can get more value out of maybe acquiring a guy like Slayton, if the Giants do end up wanting to move him, I could see there being some symmetry or some synergy rather in a deal like that might include both of those players.
Like the kind of idea of banking on high talented players coming out of college, maybe didn't get the position that they needed, didn't get the opportunity that they needed, and taking a flyer on them at the end of training camp, you know, because it is totally possible. Like you said, Elam has some talent and he's only going into his 3rd season. So it's very likely that the Bills will want to hold on to him, especially after he bounced back in the postseason, as you discussed. But it's also possible that he doesn't look so good during training camp. Maybe somebody overtakes him on the depth chart, and rather than waiving him, they want to kind of trade him away, similar to what they did with Boogie Basham last year. Total possibility. So there is an opportunity here for the Giants to swoop in at the end of training camp and take some talent off the board from another team looking to move on from a young player. So I would really like to see the Giants go that route. Again, I'd like to see them also bring in some veteran experience at the same time because let's face it, the secondary has like barely any established starters. The average age of the secondary is 22.8 years old. A lot of young guys, not a whole lot of high-end established talent in the secondary. But if you can bring in another youngster with a lot of potential, there's really nothing stopping you from doing that either. So definitely some options here for the Giants to consider. Again, it's going to be really exciting to watch training camp unfold, see what the position battles are looking like. Let's see where this Giants roster is at, where they might need to make some improvements. Who knows? Maybe they have an injury at another position, a very important position, and now all of a sudden they're thin at that position, and they got to make a trade and allocate resources to that spot rather than cornerback. I do think it's really important for the Giants to remain patient here, not rush into signing, like I said, a Stephon Gilmore before camp or anyone else at the CB2 position. If the Giants are going to make a move, it should be in August, maybe even early September, right before the start of the regular season. Give this team time to breathe. Let the roster settle. Let the depth chart settle in. Let Brian Dable choose what he wants and what he doesn't want this team to look like. So I think it's going to be really important to remain patient if you're the New York Giants, and also if you're New York Giants fans, because we still do have a couple more months before the start of the regular season, but we're getting a whole lot closer. Training camp right around the corner. Can't wait. And of course, we're going to be continuing to update you on everything New York Giants right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.